Welcome to What School Could Be's Big Think for tonight. My name is Kapono Siati, Executive Director of What School Could Be. And for the first time, I'm joined by a new co-host, Dr. Bethany Bernasconi. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful, Kapono. Excited for tonight's conversation.
Me too. I wanted to set up tonight's conversation kind of talking about our partnerships from our two organizations, What School Could Be and Two Revolutions. Adam Rubin, founder of Two Revolutions, and I have not joke, but synergy around how, our two organizations and how much synergy we have together around actually a quote from the Little Prince of all things. And this idea of rather than, teaching people to make their boats, rather than that, teach them to yearn for the ocean. And I think it's something really interesting that our two organizations share, that when we work in this educational space, we really do strive to spark a sense of adventure and innovation and imperative in the communities we're working on.
Absolutely, right? The answer's in the room, and to collaborate with educators, all across the country, and tonight to collaborate with our educators in Wyoming to really, elevate best practices and what's right for our students and what's right for our learners for tomorrow is exactly the work that needs to be happening right now.
For people who might not be really familiar with Two Revolutions, can you share, the 1-minute version of Two Revolutions and the space in which you all work?
Sure. We're an education design lab that's really committed to learner-centered and equitable practices in education. We work with systems from states to organizations to districts to schools to partnerships with higher ed and graduate programs, really with the focus on that being our North Star, on how we can support more learner-centered systems that really are, driving the future of learning.
Awesome. I appreciate you being here. Thanks for joining me and co-hosting. This is an exciting conversation because we have two really amazing guests with us in the first half hour. And might I be bold to say potentially even more amazing guests in the second half hour. In the first half hour, we have Governor Mark Gordon of Wyoming, as well as the superintendent joining us. And I'll let Dr. Bethany introduce them in just a second. And in the second half hour, we have the privilege of being able to talk to several students who are in schools in Wyoming to talk about this initiative and their experience in schools in Wyoming, which is going to be really neat. If you're joining us on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, you have the chat there. We'll be able to take questions straight from the chat. Please do introduce yourselves as you are right now. And if you have anything to ask, great place to ask on that. Bethany, I'll throw it to you to introduce our guests today.
Terrific. Well, as Kapono said, we're very pleased to have two guests who are really central in this work across Wyoming right now. Governor Mark Gordon will be joining us, as well as the Superintendent of Education, Megan Degenfelder, are here to really talk about student-centered learning in Wyoming and why this is the right time for this work and some of their hopes for student-centered learning across the state.
Excellent. Well, let's bring on the superintendent and the governor. And Bethany, you can introduce them formally.
Welcome, Governor Gordon. Pleased to have you with us this evening.
Bethany, it's good to see you. And Kapono, it's also good to see you as well. Thank you.
Terrific.
It's also great to see the good superintendent.
Yes, and welcome, Superintendent Degenfelder. Excited to have you on as well to talk about all of this wonderful work that's happening in Wyoming right now and why this is so important for our students and for their communities.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
What I'd love to do is start with just a little bit of the big picture, because if people are joining us, they don't know too much about the RIDE initiative. I'd love just for both of you to have a chance to set the frame a little bit so people understand what the RIDE initiative is and why it's important for your state, for Wyoming. And Governor Gordon, if I could toss it to you first to kind of set up this RIDE initiative for us.
Well, yeah, I think a little bit of background. I'd served on a school board, and my kids had gone through school here in Wyoming, and I've always been very much engaged in education. And during that process, there seemed to be a lot of formulaic approach to the way we were doing education. Kids did well and everything else, but it really seemed to, in some ways, inhibit the ability for really good teachers to practice their craft. It also seemed at times that students that were in their senior year, even in their junior year, were kind of twiddling their thumbs and just kind of going through the motions. So in talking to various people, we thought at the end of my first term that it might be a great time to reach into the communities, to really delve into them and ask questions different from the ones that had been asked before. Lots of times it was, do you think all the funding we give to education is coming back? Is it being properly distributed? Do you feel like you're getting good value for what you're investing? Because Wyoming invests quite a lot in education. We wanted to just kind of walk into the schools and into the communities and with businesses and say, what are we doing well? What can we do a little bit better? And lead into a bigger conversation about what are the things that we can really examine that are inhibiting our ability to do a great job of teaching our students. The superintendent was running for election at that time, so we sort of blindsided her with work that was already being done. But Megan is quite adaptable and very bright, and so quickly picked up on some of the work we were doing.
Superintendent, tell us a little bit about the RIDE initiative and how this is playing out for you. Give people a little bit of context of what this really means.
Well, I think this work is really historic, and it's a great opportunity for our state. The governor really laid that groundwork with all of the RIDE initiative work and those listening sessions across the state. And then I was able to have similar conversations throughout my time campaigning. And so looking at that foundational knowledge that we had, recognizing what Wyoming wants out of its education system and how to educate students, this is really an opportunity that we can come together and recognize that no one entity can do this alone. We can't ask our schools or teachers to fundamentally change education alone. No one entity. This has to be a systemic change. And with that must come support from leaders in education. And we must be committed to changing those systems along the way, whether it's accountability and assessment. If we ask that these districts have the courage to step into these pilots, into this new territory. So it's very exciting. I think we're moving away from that one size fits all model of education. And I come from the private sector into this role. And so it was important for me to really focus on job preparation. And so we do that. I think we best prepare students for jobs by recognizing that they're all different. They're going to go into different jobs. So why would we educate them in the exact same manner? So very excited to be a part of this project.
Thank you. In speaking with, we have 9 pilot districts across the state right now, and in speaking with the leadership across all of them, they've all mentioned that the nature of this partnership, which is bringing together the governor's office, the Department of Education, the State Board of Education, the Community College Council, the Superintendents Association, and the University of Wyoming, is really very exciting to districts to know that everyone is so committed to this focus of student-centered learning. I'm curious if both of you can expand a little bit, and perhaps Superintendent, you can begin. You're talking about this workforce preparation and helping our learners be ready for the kinds of jobs and opportunities that exist out there in Wyoming for them today. Why do you feel that student-centered learning is a pathway to help really prepare students for this?
Well, first of all, it really adapts based on a child or student's skill set or what pathway they're interested in. And so number one, creating that passion, that excitement for students to come to school every day and feel that they're committed to something that is part of their future, I think is really important, making them excited to go to school every day. And we do that by providing a pathway that best meets their skill set. And so I think that that's the first component. Second is making sure that they can move at a pace which sets them up best for success, whether that is higher education, whether that's a career pathway. And so if we're able to help them to achieve a certification, a higher and dual enrollment during their high school experience, then they're well on their way to that job. I think also it prepares them in those soft skills, thinking outside the box, being educated in a different way, challenging them. Those are all things that will be required in the workplace.
Thank you. And Governor, student-centered learning came out so loud and clear from your listening to communities around RIDE. What part of that felt like this is the right moment for your office to really support this?
Well, as I say, it's just a great opportunity to listen to communities and see what we're doing well and what we could do better, and lead into a bigger conversation. For me, there were a couple of things. So one of them was the fact that we have kids that are students that are going through high school, and many of them come from backgrounds where they have some career and technical expertise anyway. Their interests in ag or in construction or any of these kinds of trades was something that they could build on, and kept their fascination to expand into these other things. And for me, one of the things that I was most discouraged by in the conventional conversation was this sort of notion that kids are at some point either going to decide they're going to college or they're going to go into career and technical, as if this is a division that is going to run their lives. I was really struck by a friend of mine who was mentoring a young man from Green River who had gone to Afghanistan, worked in the oil fields, and had come back and had said, I really want to do accounting. I have all these other things, and I believe I bring a lot of expertise from that sector, but I want to get my degree in accounting and business. And so went back into college. So how do we prepare students that they have choices, they have opportunities? And if you look at the way career paths are evolving so rapidly now, to the superintendent's point about being able to meet and problem solve and develop, we needed to have an educational platform that could meet students where they are and further their abilities as they went forward, wherever that is in their educational path.
Governor, you and I got a chance to talk, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and I think connected around this idea of challenging that bifurcation, that dichotomy of either college or technical. And since then, I've shared your thinking with other people in the What School Could Be community, and it just seems to have such resonance around it. Superintendent, I'm wondering from operationalizing this in a school setting, what is this looking like? Where do you see leading this convergence of not either or, but both and? What does this look like for you as in your superintendenture?
Absolutely. I mean, my dream would be that every student graduates with their high school diploma, prepared to go to college, but also has a certificate in their back pocket and has plenty of options moving forward and opportunities. And so how we do that is, again, we really have to systemically come together. We can't expect, the districts to just pick this up. This isn't just a one and done pilot program, just another temporary program. This is something that we need to change throughout the system. And so in implementation, what my agency is going to have to look at is how do we now shift in our assessment? How do we become more innovative in that? Recognizing that kids are learning differently, so they may need to be assessed differently. How does all of this impact our state accountability? And all of that takes innovation, and we have to, at the state level and the government agencies, be able to be just as innovative as what we're asking of our districts.
Bethany, there's two strands that I think I'd love to make sure we explore with them before we get off. Certainly that assessment and accountability is going to be really high on people's minds. You and I had talked, Bethany, about the uniqueness about this being a state initiative and the system, the complexity of that system, right? From the leadership of the executive governor, the governor's seat and the executive seat to the superintendent's seat. Governor, I'm wondering if you might start with this. How do you envision the role of state leadership in fostering educational transformation and supporting innovative approaches to learning? I think, when I've been recounting the RIDE initiative and talking to people about this, one of the things that questions that always comes up is, well, how do you do this at a state level? What does it look like for a governor to take a leadership role in this? So how do you envision state leadership in this?
Well, thank you for that. And first, I would say Wyoming is blessed to be small. It allows us to be able to, the former governor often talked about us as a small town with very long streets. People know each other. And I think the role of leadership in this, and I say this over and over again, it is not who takes the credit. It is about how you engage people to think about what we could be and how we could get there. And I think that's been, if there's a mark of success here, it has been being able to bring on board a number of people and embrace their ideas. It's not easy, but to really get everything kind of moving the same way. And understanding that it's the dialogue between the elements that is going to form really the backbone of this as it goes forward. And I do think that what the superintendent's been talking about with the assessment, that's the hard work. That's going to be difficult. And I think it's too easy to say, well, let's just go back to what we know. But we know what we were doing can be better. That's where we started from. The other piece of this that I think is exciting is that we're talking about what we can do better. And this gives educators the opportunity to really engage, be creative, do those things we're asking of our students. And so it's a project that we can look at and build and feel really good about going forward.
And I would just add, Wyoming is so unique compared to other states. Not only do we have an elected state superintendent as well as the elected governor, but a state board, and we have more local control than many other states. And so when you think about all of these entities and different interests, I think that it is even more of a hurdle to come together in an effort. And I truly believe that we as leaders in education are more in sync than perhaps ever before. And that's really what it takes. I think districts look to us to be working together to know that system is going to change across the board. And that's really what makes this unique and the ability to get buy-in and to really make change in the state.
Yeah, Superintendent, something you just mentioned too about, the uniqueness of, that idea of local control and how the work is growing. The 9 pilot districts, I think what helps to make the work successful is that it's on building on great solid foundations that they already have underway. And then this work being and looking different in each of the districts and really building on what's important to that community so that there is that buy-in. If you were looking ahead to, one of the unique opportunities in this initiative is really that while the work is happening in classrooms, there's ideas that are bubbling up and are going to be coming out at celebrations of learning locally over the next, or have over the past week and this week. And at the end of this year, we'll come together for a statewide celebration of learning where districts and educators are going to share, what they've been working on, what has gone well, and perhaps more importantly, what some of their challenges have been. Are there particular threads or things that you are really hoping to hear that will help inform your work at the department and your work at the governor's office to, really take education to the next place in Wyoming?
Well, I think to touch on your first point, I think what makes this initiative so great and our pilots is that we are not coming with a top-down approach. We are not forcing districts to do this. We are not forcing them to do it in a particular way. We've said, okay, how will this best work in your district? And Two Revolutions has come in and been adaptable to that. And it's been really fun talking to the different districts because they're all going about it in different ways. That's the way we do things in Wyoming. That is how we foster local control, but move systemic change as a state. And so that's really exciting. And so we're going to continue through that process, not only hearing the great things that I mentioned, but also compiling what are those roadblocks and getting a group together, which we've done in my agency, to start chopping away at those. They could be rule and regulation, they could be statutory. How do we in live time start responding to those needs before we get too far into this process?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd add to that, I think, one of the great things that sort of came about of this conversation was a realization that I think people were aware of beforehand, but they didn't really know how to go about dealing with it. And that is just the clutter of standards that we had. There were so many standards that I think, if I remember correctly, it was going to take 23 years to teach all the standards. And for me, one of the things that I think is most important for students to get in life is an understanding of sort of financial literacy, particularly now. And I remember bringing this up to a couple of people, and their response was, wonderful. What we should do is pass a law and put these, a new program in place in the schools. Well, the school closest to me, a very small school, and already they were wrestling with how can we fit all these things in? And of course, schools, and this is no slight to them, but their approach is, well, we've got a new mandate from on top, so we've got to set up a new course for it. Whereas I think what we're looking at with the student-centered learning and a different approach, get rid of some of the clutter, try to figure out how across the various things to be able to teach a variety of things. That's sort of the way life works. And it is certainly what you do when you're in a job or anything else. It's not like, oh, today I'm going to work on math and tomorrow I will be working on English. It is combining those skills and making them more meaningful.
That idea of a mandate came down from on high, and now we got to create a class for it. I'm sure resonates with a lot of people who are listening in right now. That's just unfortunately too often how it happens, and it's really neat to think about it happening in a different way. There are two questions in the chat that kind of go together. One is from Gary Chapin. What are your strategies for getting people on board? What's been working for you? Any surprises? And then I might elevate part of John Masters' question around parent engagement, and somebody else echoing, how are we getting parents on board, maybe specifically with this, when we make changes, when school doesn't look like how I went to school, because everybody went to school. How do we get people on board with that?
And Superintendent, with your leave, I'll take the first shot at that, because that was sort of what we did with RIDE. Before that, there'd been extensive surveys. And as I said, the questions were usually, are you getting good value for the dollars that we're putting in? And it kind of prejudiced the way people normally responded. We started by reaching out to parents, to students, to schools, with basically a survey, and we had over 7,000 respondents, the largest that we'd ever seen in our university's polling abilities, and there was obvious engagement in education, concern. And in Wyoming, a lot of small towns, schools where the center of the community is. So that wasn't too much of a surprise. But to have people ask exactly what do you think was novel, I think. And then we had listening sessions all over the state. So the way we got people engaged was by listening to them, taking their advice, and thinking, let's really think about what they've said. I think when Superintendent Degenfelder was running, and then afterwards, I'll leave that to you, but it kind of corresponded with a little bit of that work that we were doing.
Yes, and I think, the governor makes a fantastic point. He's spot on that the first step in buy-in is listening to your communities of what they want, and as a policymaker, delivering on those. We shouldn't be making all the decisions or have all the ideas here in the Capitol. So that's step number one. But what was really neat too is we have that in so many ways. All of those listening sessions the governor mentioned, when I read through that final report, aligned exactly with what I was hearing, in my tens of thousands of miles traveling across the state. And then our State Board of Education had come out with what they call a profile of a graduate. And those mirrored in a very similar way as well. And so when you're reading this, you just cannot argue with what people want in Wyoming. And so I think that listening, and then number two, having leaders at all of these levels come together, and to the governor's previous point, not worry about who's taking credit, say what's best for students and communities. Let's come together and really approach this in a collaborative way.
Thank you. Thinking about all this work and thinking about the community involvement, the involvement of your, the businesses, the parents, the educators, all pieces. I'm curious about those taking center stage. So we'd be remiss if we're talking about student-centered learning and not talking specifically about our students. I think that the students I've been privileged enough to chat with across Wyoming are passionate about their learning, are excited to share what's happening in their schools. They're tremendously proud of the work that's happening in their schools and the opportunities that Wyoming affords them. I'm curious from both your perspectives, what role do you think, or what role are you excited to have students play in this work to shape policy, shape practices, to, help inform what's happening in your offices? Is that something that you are looking forward to? And what do you see that role being for our learners?
Absolutely. The students should be our number one focus always. And I have no doubt that in the next 30 minutes of your segment, that will be much more exciting, because those are the ones that this is all about. And in seeing them thrive in this environment, that's what we should be doing. If we're not seeing that, then we're not being successful. And so I think, the voices of our students, knowing that it's working with them, ultimate accountability is with our parents and our communities. And so seeing them thrive, seeing our teachers enjoy this and embrace it, our districts, they're the ones that are doing the difficult work. We're policymakers trying to support them and make it happen. But those are really the stars of the show, are our students that you'll hear from soon.
Speaking of students, go ahead, Governor, please.
Oh, no, I was just going to say the proof's going to be in the pudding with how kids are engaged and their visions of what they are looking forward to, what education means to them. I'm really looking forward to seeing how they engage in this process.
Me too. So speaking of that, we will have them on somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes from now. I think that'll save enough time for them. In the meantime, there's one major topic that I has come up a couple of times, and that's this idea of assessment, measuring. How do we shift success metrics? Jimmy McHugh, good friend of What School Could Be, got to see him in person a little while ago in Boulder. He's at a school doing some really cool things. Asked a question here: how are you measuring the success of such diverse, personalized approaches to learning in communities throughout Wyoming? Maybe it's that specific question. Or maybe it's more broadly, how do we change? How do we need to change what success looks like in school systems?
Superintendent, you want to take that?
Sure. Well, I think, number one, as I stated, I think ultimately accountability is our communities, our employers, our parents. But knowing that we have state, federal accountability, we're going to have to be innovative in that way. And I think, what is a testament to our pilot districts is they've jumped on board before knowing what all of those implications are, before we have determined exactly how our system will change. But I think we have to do it in this progressive manner to make sure that we do it right. And so we're getting a group together that's going to dive into first assessment. Look at what that is, because that's the crux of our accountability. And so start there and develop, how's our best means for assessment? Simple things of it should be competency based as well as we move along. But I think that will be part of the process. That's what's exciting about this, is that we don't have all the answers, but we're committed to making those changes where they make sense. And it will be based off of the pilots and what's necessary from that work.
Yeah, and I sort of tag along with that. I think it's really where the community finds, and that's sort of the broader community sees the value in the work being done here. Do they see students more engaged, more prepared, better able to meet the challenges both of the workplace and just being a citizen? One of the things from my time working on a school board and then spending some real effort sort of understanding what testing does, is understanding why we test and what we're trying to test. And do those tests actually mean something to the students? Because motivation in taking that test is a big part of their success in taking those tests. And I can remember, everybody talked about teaching to the test, but I can remember sort of efforts to make sure that our kids did a good job for a particular testing day. And that was about whether the school was going to get a good grade or a bad grade. But for the student, it meant nothing. And so, you really built a very false and weird kind of environment for education, where, you don't just get to stop on that one day and figure out how you're going to take the test. It's an ongoing thing. And so for me, I think the ability to kind of rethink where tests are, what we're testing, and how we test are going to be big parts of the success of this program.
Amazing insights on that. I cannot tell you I can cite a peer-reviewed study, but I can tell you anecdotally and in several blog posts, there's lots of reports of what stickers and pizza parties can do for standardized test reporting in school districts, for sure. So it's really neat to be thinking about what that really means for real, right? And certainly I've heard both of you say, yes, accountability. Yes, there's accountability to public funds. Yes, there's accountability to parents and industry and community. And to do this innovative work means we need to think a little bit differently about that. Maybe more broadly, not less rigorously, what I'm hearing you say is, but definitely more broadly about that. Bethany, before I throw it to you to the last question, maybe I can ask you a question. Can you tell people a little bit about this pilot process? There's 9 schools going through this. Two Revolutions is working with these schools. Maybe share a little bit about that before we go into our last question with the superintendent and governor.
Sure. Well, there are 9 districts that are currently part of the pilot, and applications are currently open for a cohort of districts for year 2, so accepting 7 more districts in. What's really exciting, I think, about our districts is that they really represent the diversity across Wyoming. We have districts that are as small as around 100 learners, K-12, and we have some of the largest districts in Wyoming, truly representing every corner of the state, every different kind of industry and community. So it's exciting to be working locally with each of those districts to really bring their vision of student-centered learning to the forefront. So we've been pleased to partner with the state and really getting out there and supporting by working with teachers in the classroom to rethink their assessment and instruction practices, and also working at the building level, right? Helping building leaders and district leaders to understand, and realize their vision while hearing from their teachers, what are some of the roadblocks getting in the way? And how can we remove those or change those or think through those? And then also hearing from the superintendents and district leadership and principals, what are some of their challenges, and trying to elevate those up to our state partners, so that the process is really informing. Practice informs policy, informs practice, and really this loop to really move the whole state towards more student-centered practices, but in a way that really honors local communities and what's important and the great work that's already happening in those places. So I guess that leads to, I get the pleasure of the final question
You get
here.
the last question. You get.
I do. So you know, thinking about all of these districts, what I'd love to hear from each of you. What do you find most exciting about this first year of the work, and your hope for where it continues to grow?
I'll kick off and then let the governor finish. You know, I'm just so excited that we are finally shifting in a direction that I think has been desired for many years. You know, I'm born and raised in Wyoming, 6th generation, and the public school system provided me so much opportunity. And so this ability to keep increasing those opportunities for the next generation are just so exciting, and shifting and being innovative. And I think that that's an exciting thing. Wyoming has never been a state to shy away from doing things differently. And so this is one example of that. And I just think that we are truly setting students up for better success. And it's all about the students, you know, and all the noise of all that we do in policy. That's the most important thing. And that's exactly what this work is.
Yeah, and I would echo that. And I guess what I'm most excited about is really seeing kids and teachers, students and teachers, just enthusiastic about what they're doing. Exploring, being ambitious, using imagination, understanding the discipline of education, and you know, just being able to build and understand more about what it is you're learning, why you're learning it, what more we can learn. Just to see teachers doing the pedagogy that's so great, and students engaged with that's what I'm really looking forward to.
It's so neat to hear you describe what I think co-author of my publication, Jennifer Klein, who's on here with us, and I would call vigorous learning. That this idea of kids being, you know, vigorous throughout their learning journey. What an amazing opportunity for students and teachers, families and communities in Wyoming. Governor Mark Gordon, it has been a privilege. Second time I get to talk to you. Thanks so much for your time. Really generous, and your leadership in this space of education, which is, as you can see in the chats, maybe you haven't seen, really refreshing, and people are quite celebratory of it. Superintendent Megan Degenfelder, thank you so much for your time and leadership. Superintendenture is certainly challenging these days, and we thank you for the work that you're putting into this right now. All of us here in education working in it, thank you for your time and effort in it. Governor, Superintendent, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bethany, we get kids now.
We do. We have some incredible learners from across the state who are excited to share the great things happening in their school and what their hopes are for the future of learning in Wyoming.
That's super exciting. Why don't we bring on the students, and Bethany, you want to lead in their introductions? I think we have time, and it'd be great to do some quick introductions of everybody who we have on the screen. I'll throw it to you, Bethany.
Terrific. Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Great to see everyone. I would love to perhaps just go around the screen and let you each introduce yourselves, perhaps share what year you are and what school you're calling in from. Let's see, Elise, do you want to start us off?
Sure. My name is Elise Newton. I'm a junior at Giant Central High School in Laramie 1, and I'm excited to be here.
Terrific. Destiny and Garrett, do you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Destiny German. I'm a senior.
And I'm Garrett Smith. I'm also a senior.
And we're coming in from Green River High School.
Terrific. Thank you. All right. Cecily and Andrew, want to say hello?
Yeah, I'm Andrew.
I'm Cecily.
We're both seniors at Jackson Hole High School.
Terrific. And kicking it off to Sophie and Riley.
Hi, I'm Sophie and I'm a senior at Upton High School.
And I'm Riley and I'm a junior at Upton High School.
So my name's Capono. Nice to meet you guys. I'm executive director of What School Could Be. As you guys know, you probably were watching, we just had the governor and superintendent on talking about this RIDE initiative, talking about the pilot schools that Two Revolutions are working with. And it all comes down to students. This is why we're doing it. And it would be counterproductive to be sitting here with politicians and not talking to you guys and seeing what this is like for you all. I have a question. It's a launch-off question. Bethany and I probably have several questions, but at this point, I would love to re-engage our audience. So we got people live on Facebook. We have people live on YouTube. If you're joining us live and you have questions for our students here today, certainly, as you can probably already tell, they are ready to answer them. But I'm going to jump in. So what aspects of traditional education do you find most limiting or frustrating? And how do you believe student-centered learning, what we're pushing on in these pilot schools, these schools that are piloting this work that we're doing right now, can address these challenges?
Personally, I think one of the biggest things that's most limiting in the education system right now is I feel like we're not adequately preparing our students for the future and life after high school. I think, elementary school prepares students for middle school prepares students for high school, and high school prepares the students for whatever pathway they choose after that. And I think just as of recently, we've gotten really good at teaching students that maybe college isn't, if you're not going to college, that's fine. You can go to trade school, military, or straight into the workforce. But the one thing that we're all going into is the real world. So I think one of the biggest things that we lack is real world skills like financial literacy and just kind of those real world soft skills. And I think student-centered learning can really help target that by just hearing what students want to learn and what they feel like they need to learn before going off into the real world.
If I could second that. Yeah, sorry. If I could second that, I think I agree with everything she said. I think you guys talked about right before we got on about kind of testing, and you talked about kind of what are the goals when we test kids, especially if you're trying to get through this curriculum. Like, I think the biggest limiting thing for us as learners is kind of this inability or unwillingness to really address the why of what we're doing. I think a lot of times people get caught up in creating new metrics or trying to create kind of a new system to the same end goal. And I think really stepping back and seeing, hey, where are kids now with, where technology is, where the world's going, like where are kids starting now and where are they trying to go to, and really establishing a path from the first floor up rather than trying to start with your end goal and work downwards.
Terrific. So I'm curious, if we can build on that, and please, anyone, feel free to jump in. How do you want to show what you know, right? If we're talking about student-centered learning and instead of coming up with just more metrics, are there ways that you feel like you have the opportunity to better show what you know or showcase what you're capable of? And are some of these things happening in your schools already? And or what are some ideas that you all have?
So here at Upton High, we have a lot of projects that show what we know. And they range from whatever we want to do. So like I've done a movie before in history class to represent what I've learned. And I just feel like if we have more options, we're more engaged in what we're learning, so it helps.
Yeah, I would, I've done like different types of projects. I've done websites that have actually like helped me learn more of like in incorporating different other classes into other classes that I've been doing, like combining history and English or science and history. It just can use that to get our competency.
We'll kind of also piggyback off that. One of the biggest things that we've talked about is like job shadowing and how that can help you like get ready for whatever you're going to do for the rest of your life, whether like going to college or going to a trade school or whatever it is. We actually have a student here at our high school. She's a junior who's actually kind of starting that, and she's going to do like a job shadow with a veterinarian that we have locally to try to like advance her stuff that she's learned in like vet science, I believe it was. And so we also kind of talked about conjoining classes kind of like they did, where maybe like one of our CTE classes, for example, which is like all of our shop classes, our culinaries, our sports medicine, kind of like that, combining with like a different class too. Like we have a consumer science and a finance class. Those are pretty like similar classes to combine them as credits kind of thing too.
And it's not just like, I think that part of it is, for me, I'm like a visual learner and I like application. And so for me to be like, I love woodworking. So for me to be like in a real wood shop, working with something that has a purpose, that's how I learn. I can't do algebra and learn how to do a woods project from that, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm thinking back to, I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, but the organization I'm part of, What School Could Be, our founder produced a film called Most Likely to Succeed. And it followed two students at High Tech High, a charter school in California, through these kind of project-based learning. And in the process, they interviewed a bunch of kids. And there was I remember a scene. And in that scene, there's, I don't know, 5, 6 high school students sitting in a room, quite similar to this setting, except live in a room. And the interviewer asks them, if you were to be able to go to school to learn, real skills and really apply them in the real world, or, do tests like you're doing right now and, play the game and get good grades and go to college, which would it be? And everybody in the film is ready for them to say the first. And every single kid is like, oh, we'll just play the game and get the grades. We know how to do that. You guys are saying something different here, which is neat to hear. I think times have really changed. And to that extent of times changing and AI, I'll just use AI as one example, but it doesn't need to be AI, whether it's, what's happening in the climate, what's happening socially, what's happening economically, and what's happening technologically with AI. There's a lot of stuff going on right now. And I think that your generation of high school students sees things really differently than 10 years ago, the generation of students that was filmed in Most Likely to Succeed, or potentially. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little too much there. But from what you're seeing, what do you want to be prepared for? I think, as adults, we sit around here talking about different skills and critical thinking and this and that and the other. What are your hopes that this newfangled way of doing things, student-centered, actually benefits you all? What do you want out of this? What do you want to be prepared for? What are your hopes for the future? And how does this initiative help you get there?
Well, for me, I think the most important thing is just being allowed to explore what my interests are, because as of now, it's very unclear to me where I'm going to go with my college education, even high school education. And I think being given the opportunity to explore different industries and career paths during high school would just give me so many more tools, and it would have made me so much more effective with my time and energy. Like what you said, when those students said that they were doing things just for the grades, it definitely is easy to do in the system that we're currently in, to just do things for completion rather than to actually learn them. But I think that's why it needs to change.
We'll kind of piggyback off that too, and what she said is that I feel like job shadowing, like we talked about, you would be able to explore and understand what you want to do. And maybe you're exploring something because this is your interest, and then you decide, okay, actually, that's not what I want to do. That doesn't interest me anymore. And then you can change paths in a sense, because if you think about it, when you're in college, how many people change their majors more than once is more than probably should be. And I feel like this could help prevent that and help get students on the right path from the beginning.
Yeah. And this isn't all just about college either. Like, it can decide where you want to go to college, and college is expensive. Don't get me wrong. It can help you decide if you're going to go to college. It can tell you if you want to go in the trades or if you want to be a doctor. Like that's what it's designed to help you do, I think.
Sorry, stealing mic if anyone else is about to go, but I also think that being able to be more goal oriented is a huge piece. Like I think when you're talking about AI and tech coming up so fast, like I think we're called the first generation to have, phones through middle school or something like that. Like having all that information at our fingertips, I think a lot of kids like come into high school or even the end of middle school with like, when you ask a kid their favorite subject, it's not a hard question. Like most of the kids come in with like, hey, I'm specialized in this. Like I really love this. So I think with having more like ownership of learning and having more specialization, not towards like picking your career path from middle school and having to follow it, because I don't know if that's healthy for tweens and teens and things, but having not specializing where you're going to go with your career, but specializing how you're going to accomplish daily, monthly, and yearly goals as far as like what you're learning, I think is way more important. I think like being able to say like, today I want to be exposed to these new things, or by the end of the year, I want to be able to have these skills and also be dipping my toes into these new buckets. Like I think being able to specialize goal oriented is huge.
Yeah, and I think from just like what I want to learn from student-centered learning is I just kind of want to learn how to live after high school, live independently. After I graduate, I won't be living with my parents anymore, so I won't know how to do any of those big things like pay taxes, how to grocery shop, what credit and debit is. And so I think that's a really big thing is I just want to know how to live independently, and some students don't get the opportunity to learn that from their parents or from a mentor or a guardian. And I think we shouldn't be limiting students that do want to learn different skills that they'll need independently. So yeah.
So going back to what the first group said, the work study is what I do, and I wasn't sure what path I wanted to go on to after high school, but I got the opportunity to work at a daycare, and so during the morning of my school day, I worked there, and I've learned so many skills like how to care for children, how to communicate, and I just think that's going to help me so much more as I move through life and just give me a lot of skills that I didn't have before.
And going to like more like travel based of like what you want to do in the future, being able to like take certain classes and like especially college classes in high school definitely helps with like creating more of like an independent path of like how you want to go.
I have to say, I'm so excited to hear the threads. I have so many questions that we're just not going to have enough time to talk to everyone about. But I'm hearing interdisciplinary. I'm hearing from you all that learning doesn't happen in silos. I'm hearing so much about different skills and real world application, and that we need to value all different aspects of that, from those life skills. Lisa, I hear you talking about like paying taxes and setting goals, and I hear you all talking about like really what I feel like it comes down to is I hear you all talking about wanting to have a voice in your education and how important having agency and ownership of some of your learning really is to all of you. And I'm curious, you're all in different places across the state. Can you share an example of an opportunity you've really had to have agency, or an example of student-centered learning that has had an impact on, maybe your education, but maybe even more importantly, your personal growth as as someone who's going to step out eventually in just a couple of years and be out on your own? I'd really love to hear that from each of you.
So the most meaningful educational experience I've ever had was an opportunity that we have at our school called work-based learning, where you work with, which sounds very similar to what a few other groups have spoken about, but you work with a counselor and find a place in town that allows you to, it just allows you to choose where you want to work. You do an internship, working, volunteering. And what I chose to do was work at the local radio station. I interned there for the entire last school year, and then with that was able to work full time in the summer after doing the internship, and was actually getting paid, which was really exciting because it wouldn't have happened without the internship first. And I learned so much during that time about where I want to go in my future, if I want to continue pursuing that, or if I want to change paths a little bit. So for me, that's the best experience I've ever had at school, and it happened outside of the classroom.
All right. So here we don't have like a work-based learning program set up like they were explaining. That's kind of what we're here for. But anyway, so we have a dual enrollment with the college here, and I've always been interested in going into the medical field. I eventually want to become an anesthesiologist, but I wanted to test out the medical field before I did anything. So the only option I had to do that I knew of was go to the college. And so I took a phlebotomy class last semester, drawing people's blood just to test it out. And I ended up really liking it, but it was just like a, just try it out kind of thing. And I really liked that experience just because it wasn't committing to the job itself, but it was also experiencing what it would be like, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
For me, mine would be that I got the opportunity to manage our football team the last 4 years. And so I got to see like different aspects of like a sport in a sense. And I got to see like more about what our athletic trainer does. And I also am taking classes with him. And so with that like sparked my interest in like body movement, I guess, in a sense. So like kinesiology and health is what I plan on going into. And so I wouldn't have had that opportunity to see things like what our athletic trainer does if I didn't have the opportunity to like join the team in a sense. And so kind of same thing as Garrett, it's just having different opportunities than other people in a sense helps you strive.
Like I said before, I gotta go work at a daycare, so that kind of gave me the motivation to I wanted to do something with kids. Like that's what I wanted. I want to be an elementary teacher. So I actually got to choose a college class to go into for my math, and my guidance counselor made it possible for me to take a math class that's made for elementary teachers. So it's just, this is another way that individualized learning kind of pushes you towards, picking your path and then going with it.
And for me, I talked to our counselor and about like how I want to go to like a lot of like, more prestigious schools and for college and everything like that. And so she decided to put me into AP classes where it's basically just me and the teacher one-on-one, and I'm able to just learn one-on-one and in order to try to get that kind of personalized learning for my future.
For me, my school district has been very open in kind of what students want and just very open ears. And so I had the opportunity to run a project that's goal is to try and get a class that teaches students basic life skills implemented into our school district. So doing that, I was able to not only get a better understanding about the education system in my school district, but also in Wyoming, and also just kind of get those communication skills professionally, reaching out to different community members, see what they think about it, but also reaching out to students in my district and in other school districts on, what they think about a possible class that, like a proposed course, and kind of what they see. So kind of learning professional communication skills through my district being so helpful in the project I wanted to create. and also just kind of learning advocation skills, not only for myself, but the people around me.
That is awesome. John Masters has said that Wyoming's future is in good hands, and I certainly agree with that. As we hit the top of the hour, students, if you don't mind just hanging for 1 second while we do a couple quick announcements, and then I'll come back and thank everybody in just 1 second. Bethany, you want to do a quick shout out for the next pilot in case people are just tuning in a little late?
Yeah, terrific. So we just had our celebrations of learning, marked the midpoint in year 1 of our pilot. This is the RIDE Student-Centered Learning Pilot. So we have 9 districts currently, and applications are currently open. We are accepting another 7 districts into the program for next year. So if you check out the governor's website, RIDE Future of Learning, you'll find the application listed there, and hope that we have lots of people really excited about this great work that's happening, because it's really about, well, it's about all of these folks on the call right now. It's about Wyoming's future, and that is these students. And this is the work that truly matters. So want to applaud the districts that are engaged in this pilot already, and those that are thinking about, what are their next steps. Hope that they'll jump on board as well.
Thank you. I want to talk about really quickly a partnership project that we have with Two Revolutions. What school could be at Two Revolutions? We have a master's cohort coming up in competency-based education. It is amazing. Learning-centered practices. It is the master's program that you want to take to get to this level of change. Our goal is to work with schools and school districts to have cohorts of educators join the program. However, you can certainly join it as a singleton teacher. 17 months online, fully accredited, Two Revolutions, and What School Could Be with Spalding University. Check out whatschoolcouldbe.org for more information and to apply. Would love to invite you all to the next big think, our next big discussion coming up in just a few weeks. We have a student-driven big think, amplifying change makers in action. Students of the Frankfurt International School, the American School of Budapest, the Munich International School, and the American School of Doha. I'm super excited about this because it's another chance for us to feature student and student voice. So that'll be really amazing. It is March 5th at 1 p.m. Eastern. And then depending on where you are in the world, it is March 6th in the morning if you're on the other side of the Atlantic pond. And one last announcement, we would encourage all of you to join the What School Could Be community, community.whatschoolcouldbe.org or just whatschoolcouldbe.org. Continue that conversation there. We have a digital community dedicated to this. If you're an educator or a fan of education, come and join us and be part of the conversation. On that, Bethany, I need to thank you for being an amazing co-host and for Two Revolutions for being a great partner. And most importantly, second most importantly, we'll re-thank the governor and the superintendent for being here with us earlier. And most importantly, Sophie, Riley, Elise, Destiny, Garrett, Cecily, and Andrew, thank you guys so much for being here. You guys are inspiring, and we really appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone. Can't wait to see what you do next.
All right. Take care, everybody. Have a good night.